Everyone, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Claire, and I hope this video will be helpful to you. Now, I know the title says menstrual cycle here, yeah, but I don't want you to picture that we're learning the menstrual cycle. What I want you to imagine is that we are learning endocrine system, and this will become apparent. This is because when you know how one system works, you know how everything works. Now, it's just a personal preference that I prefer to know the menstrual cycle. Knowing the menstrual cycle kind of like gives you a baseline to know each and every single thing that goes on in the endocrine system. Yeah. So, what happens is I like to call it a reading session. So what happens is I am literally studying with you. This is not like a YouTube video where you are watching a video and getting the education. I am literally studying with you. So what's going to happen is I'm going to read the paragraph. I am going to explain the paragraph. All right. And always remember that my phone number is always at the bottom of these PDFs. So you can always text me or WhatsApp me if there are certain questions you have. If I am unable to answer, I'll let you know. So I read the paragraph, I explain the paragraph, and just like that, we just like keep it going, yeah? So let's start. So the menstrual cycle. Question one reads, what is the menstrual cycle? The menstrual cycle is a series of events that prepares the body for pregnancy each month. It is controlled by hormones from the brain, ovaries, and pituitary gland. A typical menstrual cycle lasts 24 to 38 days. So, what does this mean? Yeah, I want you to understand something very critical. A lot of people think that a menstrual cycle is the same as menstruation. Absolutely not. When we say menstrual cycle, we are looking at the sequence of events that prepare a woman for pregnancy. I want you to think of it like this. Preparing a meal is different from eating a meal. In this sense here, the woman's body is being prepared for pregnancy to receive a baby. All right. Now, on the other hand, menstruation on its own is when blood is leaving the vagina. That's what we want to understand. The same way, preparing a meal is different from eating a meal is the same thing we're looking at here. So, the menstrual cycle is the sequence of events that prepare a woman's body for pregnancy. But however, menstruation is the blood that comes out of the vagina. So we want to understand, why does this happen? What does it mean when it doesn't happen? And how do we rectify this problem if it does happen? So we look at question two now. Question two reads, what is menstruation? Menstruation is also known as a period. It's the vaginal bleeding that occurs when the lining of the uterus is shed. It's a normal part of a woman's monthly cycle and is a sign that the body is preparing for pregnancy. Now, I should probably change this, yeah? Because menstruation is not a sign that the woman's body is preparing for pregnancy. It is a sign that the woman's body has not received a fertilized egg, meaning that she is not pregnant. The preparation for pregnancy is unnecessary. That is why the lining of the uterus is shed. So we're going to have a look at that, and I'll keep on repeating myself of certain things. Like I've said, right now, what we are doing, we are literally studying together. All right. So we can have a look at this image here. Now, that uterine lining is what slows off. Now, I want you to understand something very, very critical in medicine. When you hear the word endo, it means innermost lining. If you look here at this very nice part here when we're saying uterine lining, it is the one that is in direct contact with whatever is on the inside. That is what we mean when we say endometrial lining. Now, endothelial lining is for blood vessels. So long as the name starts with endo, we know that it is the innermost lining. All right. So now we want to understand how the menstrual cycle occurs. All right. Now, be it in the benefit of hindsight, I'm not really sure if I should say how does the menstrual cycle occur or why does the menstrual cycle occur. Please let me know what you think. So, how does the menstrual cycle occur? This occurs as a result of the shedding of the endometrial lining following failure of fertilization of the oocyte or failure of implantation. So, there is a difference, and this is where a lot of religious debates come in, yeah? Now, uh, when you look at fertilization, fertilization means the man's genetic material, the woman's genetic material have fused together. All right. Now, religiously, they believe that this is where life has begun when the man's genetic material and the woman's genetic material have fused together. This is what religion believes. Now, in science, fertilization is not pregnancy, yeah? Until this fertilized egg embeds itself in the lining of a uterus, a woman is not pregnant. So fertilization can happen, but implantation does not happen, or fertilization does not happen to begin with. So either or could have failed, and the woman will experience a menstrual cycle, rather not a menstrual cycle, menstruation. At the end of the day, so long as a woman is not pregnant, she will menstruate. So the issue is not necessarily the fertilization. Fertilization can happen, but it is very possible that implantation will not happen. So what happens is the male genetic material, female genetic material fuse together. Once they fuse together, if you look here, it will travel down very nicely the fallopian tube and embed itself in the endometrium, which is the endometrial lining. And then that is when we consider a woman is pregnant. All right. So if fertilization fails to happen, or implantation fails to happen, a woman does not get pregnant and she will experience a menstruation. That is why no menstruation is a sign of pregnancy. And we're gonna understand that. Why does menstruation stop when a woman is pregnant? That has to make a lot of sense because we take advantage of this information when it comes to testing for pregnancy. All right. So when we look at the anatomy of the uterus, it is very important to know. But for menstrual cycle, they're just basically they're just three things I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on the ovary. I want you to focus on the endometrium. I also want you to focus on the fallopian tube, and we will get to all of them in detail as we go along. So the cycle depends on changes occurring within the ovaries and fluctuation in the ovarian hormones that are themselves controlled by the pituitary and hypothalamus, the hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis. What does this mean? So here we've got a very nice picture of a brain, lovely picture of a brain. So what does the hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis mean? What this means is this. The menstrual cycle starts in the brain. It does not start in the uterus. And yes, I know you are probably thinking it starts in the uterus. No, it does not. It starts in the brain. And we will understand why it starts in the brain. And now emphasize again and again and again. Menstrual cycle does not start in the uterus. I do not know who came up with that in their heads. It starts from the brain. Maybe this is why I've always assumed, maybe this is why menstruation makes half of us crazy, because, women are not exactly very normal people. Can you blame us? But anyway, let's move forward. So, when you look at this image here, we have this part here known as the thalamus. All right, this very nice part here labeled the thalamus. So now on the thalamus here, I want you to understand something, that the thalamus and the hypothalamus, why is it named so? See, it is named the hypothalamus because it lies just below the thalamus. In medicine, when we say hyper, means high. Hyperglycemia, high blood glucose levels. Hypoglycemia, low blood glucose levels. So when we say hyper in medicine, we're saying it is high. When we say hypo in medicine, we're saying it is low. So the name of this guy here is the thalamus, and the name of this guy is the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is named so because it lies below the thalamus. So The pituitary gland lies just below the hypothalamus, just there, and we'll get into the very detailed anatomy about the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland another time, yeah? So now one thing I want you to understand is this. The command center, or where I just said the menstrual cycle starts in the brain, the command center on its own is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is where the menstrual cycle starts because the hypothalamus is the command center and the pituitary gland receives commands. So follow what I'm about to say very, very carefully. Depending on the commands that the pituitary gland receives, that is the response the body will give. Now, what are these commands? These commands are what we call hormones. So the hypothalamus, it's one of its biggest functions, rather, is secretion of hormones that will control the pituitary gland. So now the hypothalamus is the guy that is going to tell the pituitary gland what to do for the body to give a response. So let us give an example. The hypothalamus is going to release a hormone to stimulate the pituitary gland to stimulate a target organ. That is always how the sequence of events happen. Whichever hormone you are talking about that comes from the hypothalamus, that is the sequence of events. The hypothalamus has got no direct influence on the target organ. The pituitary gland is, so to say, the mediator or the instigator to give these commands. So let's look at this. The menstrual cycle, we are trying to figure out how the woman's body removes blood from the vagina every month. The hypothalamus is going to release what we call gonadotropin releasing hormone. Now, listen to the name very carefully. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. I will say it again. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. One more time, I'm gonna say it again. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. Now, every hormone is so named so for a purpose. The term gonads in males are the testes, and gonads in females are the ovaries. So now, a gonad is a sex gland. There is a difference between a sex gland and a sex organ. What you use for sex is a sex organ. What you use for sexual function is what we call a sex gland. So let's have a look at that. What do we mean by that? Anything that, so to say, stimulates arousal or pregnancy or maturation of sperms is gonna come from a gland, which is a sex gland. But a sex organ is what you use for sexual intercourse. So now what happens is this. The hypothalamus will release gonadotropin releasing hormone. It is termed gonad because this influence is going to go to the target organ, which is the gonads. So regardless of whether we're talking about a male or a female, the, so to say, reaction is the same for both a man and a woman here, yeah? So this is what's going to happen. Gonad, we've said it is named gonad because its influence is on the sex gland. And then gonadotropin. Tropin means it is going to stimulate cells in the anterior pituitary. Anything you see ending with the name trough is found in the anterior pituitary. In the anterior pituitary, there are 5 cells. There are only 5 cells. We have number 1, gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary that respond to gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. This is our main focus. We also have somatotrophs in the anterior pituitary. We have the lactotrophs. All right. We also have the corticotrophs. Okay. And finally, we have the thyrotrophs. That is why I am saying, if you just know one, you know all of them. So we are focusing on the gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary. The gonadotrophs respond to gonadotropin releasing hormone. So now the part where it says releasing hormone, what it means is this, is that the gonadotropin releasing hormone will stimulate the gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary to release hormones that will influence the gonads. I'll say that again. The name gonadotropin releasing hormone is named so because it will stimulate the gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary, all right, to influence the gonads. That is why it is called gonadotropin releasing hormone. It is releasing the hormones that will stimulate the gonads. Now, tropin is coming from the name that anything that ends with the name troph is an anterior pituitary hormone. So, gonadotropin releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus, all right, to stimulate the gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary. Now, when the gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary are stimulated, it will release two hormones: follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now, these two guys, yeah, these two very specific guys are now going to go to the gonads. And the gonads as well will create their own influence, which we're going to have a look at. I hope that's made sense. And if you actually look at others, let's have a look at a different one. Growth hormone releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus. And then the hypothalamus, growth hormone releasing hormone, will stimulate the somatotrophs in the anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. Human growth hormone. So that is the same sequence of events. The only thing we've changed is the command center. So even if we look at a different one, the hypothalamus will release thyroid releasing hormone, which will stimulate the thyrotrophs in the anterior pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone, which is going to stimulate the thyroid gland. And that is the sequence of events. It does not change. It is always the same. Change the commands from the hypothalamus and you have changed the response. For menstrual cycle, it is called hypothalamo-pituitary-ovarian axis because the hypothalamus, the control center, sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which will send the signal to the ovaries. So it is called hypothalamo-pituitary-ovarian axis. These are the guys where the cycle is going to keep happening. All right. And it's just going to keep going and going and going. Okay. I hope that has made a lot of sense. So now we can move on to read about the hypothalamus. So please don't forget to focus on only 3 structures at a time. Today I've talked about 3 in the brain: thalamus, hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. Please don't try to know everything at once. It becomes rather confusing, rather stressful, and it almost feels very pointless because you'll keep forgetting. So just try to do like 3 every day, or maybe even 5. 5 can work. Just 5 every day, 5 every day, 5 every day. And if you're doing them every day, by the time you've reached like 1 month, you have done 150. All right. So we can continue to read. Hypothalamus. The hypothalamus in the forebrain secretes the peptide hormone gonadotropin releasing hormone, which in turn controls the pituitary hormone secretion. Gonadotropin releasing hormone must be released in a pulsatal fashion to stimulate pituitary secretion of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. If gonadotropin releasing hormone is given in a constant high dose, it desensitizes the gonadotropin releasing hormone receptor and reduces luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone release. Please note, gonadotropin releasing hormone receptors are present in the anterior pituitary gonadotroph cells and extrapituitary tissues. So let's have a look at what this means. Gonadotropin releasing hormone is a peptide hormone. Now, this should tell you quite a number of things. Number 1 is that if we are giving a drug that mimics gonadotropin releasing hormone, we are going to give it as an injection. Why will we do that? We will give it as an injection merely because a peptide hormone means it is made of amino acids, right? So if you guys don't know what it is, so basically amino acids make up proteins. And when you chew your chicken, you swallow, your body breaks down the protein into amino acids. So a peptide hormone is made of amino acids. So meaning if we administer these drugs by mouth, they will not survive the harsh environment of the GI. And they will be broken down into amino acids, meaning what you have is no longer the drug you want. What you have is broken down amino acids. That is why it is administered via injection so that we avoid the GI tract. Okay, So now understand this. Gonadotropin releasing hormone isn't released as a gush, like opening like a fire hydrant tap, yeah? Like, when you open a fire hydrant tap, there's a lot of water pressure that comes out. I want you to imagine we take a bucket and then we put this bucket under a tap and then we open the tap very slightly and one drop of water keeps entering this bucket. Now, if you think about it rather carefully, if you look at the bucket after 10 hours, the bucket won't be full. But those one drops accumulate to a very large amount. If you go and check the bucket after 28 days, the bucket would have filled up to a very significant amount. And this is what we mean when we say gonadotropin is released in a pulsatal fashion. It is released in a very slow, calm motion. It doesn't come out full throttle. Why does it do that? The reason why it does that is because if gonadotropin releasing hormone is released in a very constant high dose, okay, the anterior pituitary becomes less sensitive to the effects of gonadotropin releasing hormone. So I want you to imagine this very nice illustrative diagram here, okay? If we look at this diagram here, when receptors are too many like here, that means the hormone is in very low amounts. No, sorry, yes, the hormone is in very low amounts. But when the receptors are very few, it means that the hormone is in very high amounts. This is a danger because I want you to picture this. If gonadotropin releasing hormone is released in a very high dose, what will happen to the gonadotroph cells of the anterior pituitary is that the receptors are going to reduce because the dose is too high. We want to like kind of control it. And if the receptors reduce, we will produce less of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. And if we produce less of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, we are going to produce less of an effect on the gonads. Now, I'm going to give you two very, very silly examples. And I got this example from someone I love so much. Hi, Ormel. So, you men, if a girl is always available, as you people like to call it, oh, she a hoe. If a girl has sex with every guy that's available, you are less sensitized to the fact that she may be a beautiful woman, but it is not attractive if she's all over the place. But then this other girl who is unavailable to a lot of men, that's who all the men want. I want you to think of the receptors as, so to say, the men. So gonadotropin releasing hormone is the response of the woman. If a woman comes off on you too strong, is unattractive, you back down. But when a woman gives you enough interest, but not enough to creep you out, you are interested. So it's the same thing that happens here. If gonadotropin dosage is way too high, the number of receptors reduces. And if the number of receptors reduce, then it means luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone equally reduce. And if they both reduce, the stimulation of the gonads is equally reduced. Okay, so that is the issue here. And I'll give you another example. We've all seen the chakolwas in the streets. If you give that chakolwa a 500 milliliters bottle of wine, yeah, to drink, he's not gonna get drunk because he's very used to the juntas and the balls and the whatnot. He has built a tolerance. But you give a 5-year-old baby a 500 milliliter bottle of wine, they would definitely get drunk because they haven't built that tolerance. So for lack of a better word, the anterior pituitary is going to build a tolerance to the effects of gonadotropin releasing hormone if it is released in a constant high dose. This is why it is released in a pulsatal fashion. And we take advantage of this on treatment of a lot of diseases, yeah, and which we're going to have a look at. So now, the other thing that was here is NB, gonadotropin releasing hormone receptors are present in the pituitary gonadotroph cells and extrapituitary tissues. So now we can move on to this diagram here. So we have the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. So the hypothalamus is going to release gonadotropin releasing hormone. Gonadotropin releasing hormone will stimulate the anterior pituitary to release two hormones, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Whether it's a man, whether it's a female, hypothalamus and anterior pituitary are the same. Now, the only thing that is different is the amount of the hormone. Women produce more estrogen than men, and men produce more testosterone than women. If a woman produces high doses of testosterone, that's when you see the women with the beards and the deep voice and the more manly features, yeah? And if a man produces too much estrogen, they're the ones who develop breasts. They're the ones with erectile dysfunction, which we will get into. It's one of the reasons why we stopped using estrogen injections to treat benign prostate hyperplasia, because it put men at risk of breast cancer, which we will get into. So follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone will stimulate the ovary to release two hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Now, estrogen and progesterone will thicken the endometrial lining, all right, to prepare it for pregnancy. And we are going to get into very big detail about the effects of estrogen and progesterone in the next video. But I hope this was a very, very good introduction. I hope you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and remember, I always leave my phone number so that you can text me, or if you have any questions or something just didn't make sense, and I can update the notes so that they make a little bit more sense. And I hope to see you next time, and watch out for my next video. Bye.